It's interesting because so much of the liberal project, right? The small L liberal project was to disabuse people of stereotypes and disabuse people of these things that would, pigeonhole people and put them in boxes and, you know, give people false impressions that they understand who this person is because they're a member of such and such group. And then here we are kind of reversing that by, inadvertently, I'm sure, but we're reversing it because we're kind of just assuming, all trans people think the same. They all have the same opinion about these particular issues. And I mean, the same thing. There are a lot of analogs with race conversations. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit too, because I do want to ask you. But um, yeah, it's just an interesting thing that we're kind of crawling into the boxes and we're kind of pigeonholing ourselves in the way that we discuss these things and one another. And happily, everyone seems to be content about the pigeonholing as long as it fits a certain ideological shape. But you're so willing to break out of that and to be heterodox and to kind of, challenge that. Doesn't I'm sure that doesn't land well with many people. So I'm curious what it's like for you to engage in that way.
Well, I mean, I like that you bring up sort of the idea that, there was a time when, we would have been screaming if people were trying to, in today's language, police our language or police our identities. But I've always been countercultural. Right. But I was countercultural in a way, like you mentioned, I was countercultural in a way that worked well for the community that I was part of, but not for the broad mainstream society. So I was a little tomboy, and that was somewhat acceptable. Right. Totally acceptable for my father, who was raising me as a single parent, but not so much from my mother or my grandmother or my aunts. But it was fine in school because it was the 70s and everybody was going towards that sort of unisex co-ed thing in the 70s. But then as I got older and older, that countercultural movement started to upset things a little bit more as far as maybe going out for jobs. I was too masculine maybe for particular jobs. My appearance was too off-putting to people. But I could go into gay and lesbian community or lesbian community because it was pretty narrow back then. And I could find solace and friendship and comfort and camaraderie because I could say, these are the experiences I'm having. But then all of a sudden, what I find really interesting is that with a gender transition, so to speak, with just changing the way I look and sound because I put hormones into my body, all of the rules have changed in the sense that now I'm viewed as part of mainstream society, right? Not the subculture of gay LGBT community, but I'm part of the dominant, so to speak, the straight world, which of course I know very little about because even though I was raised in it, I really did seclude myself off for quite a while. I was 39 when I started hormones. So I was living in the sort of secluded safety of LGBT community for a long time. I was working in that community. I was mostly friends with people just in that community. So when I find myself on the outside now, so to speak, when I go into the trans community, instead of it feeling like a soft, safe landing space like lesbian community used to feel like, it feels hostile. And that's because this countercultural default setting that I have is now pushing up against those expectations because you're trans, so you're supposed to espouse certain types of views. You're supposed to challenge certain things, and I may or may not do that, but I'm going to do it because I want to or not want to, not because it's what's expected of me. And that's my rebelliousness, the rebelliousness that used to get me recognized as being a leader in a community. In some respects, is having a different effect. And so, but it's who I am at the core. I'm not a rule breaker. I'm actually former military and law enforcement. I'm actually a rule follower, raised Catholic. So I'm quite, there's a sense in which I sort of do fall in line to a certain respect. But when and if I can push a boundary or test a boundary, I'm going to do it. Obviously, look at what I've done, right?
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I inject testosterone into my body and I've morphed myself into a completely different person. But who I am at the core is still there. And who I was at the core before was, a loud and proud member of the lesbian community. Now I'm just a man taking up too much space with my toxic masculinity, right? It's like this, it's this really weird. I was much more, I don't know, argumentative and angry before I put testosterone into my body. So it's this really weird, it's like going into like a funny mirrors hall.
Hmm.
The reflections, it's just like, it just doesn't make sense to me sometimes.